Then it says, this hangout on air is live. So you know what that means, kids. It's live, and it's the Pop Cult Online Power Hour because I said so. And I'm
Live and it ain't no jive.
and that's my partner down there in the Robin Hood hat or Green Arrow, whoever you want him to be. Bob Retail. Say hello, Bob.
Hello, Rick.
Ooh, we missed a week because of Father's Day, and nothing spectacular happening there.
Being a father.
Went to see a movie, I think. Now I can't even remember. Seems like it was that's just old age. Let's just skip it then. My random stack this week. It's not Millie the model.
Millie.
It's the new Millie the model. I would qualify this as an Archie knockoff, wouldn't you?
Indeed. Much like this is an Archie
Oh, Tippy Teen. I think I've got that one.
Tippy Canoe and Tyler too. Tippy Teen and
Okay, and here's the real thing. No issue allowed.
I thought you were giving me a command.
Look at the size of the computer that they're looking at.
That's a small one.
Yeah, yeah.
I like
Amazing.
that wavy vertical line. I don't know what the deal is with that.
And this one, the reason I have these books is because I'll just grab a stack of books and they'll just be placed at various points around the house. And this is an issue of The Fly, which, I don't know, it helped me kill a few seconds. It wasn't that great. So to cleanse the palate, I went with this. Which is
I have that. Well, it's not like a revelation for me to say, I have that issue.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff.
I will pull a random selection of things that came in my shipment this week.
Are you on a first-name basis with your delivery guy?
He usually comes when I'm not home. I'm probably just that bastard who makes me carry heavy packages every single day. But there's Unity. There's an issue of Thunderbolts where Frank Castle's finally going to Punisher versus the Thunderbolts. He's sick of them. Here's some crazy cat business going on. This is a wraparound cover with mega amounts of cattage going on.
So what is that?
It's called Lunita. It is it's from Amigo, which does. Here's some interior art.
Oh, nice.
It's from like Spain, so it was originally in Spanish, I believe, and it's translated into English here. It's kind of cool. There's a lot of nice European comics that we don't get a lot of over here. That some of these companies, when they do the reprints of them, like a few years ago, there was a GG Studios that didn't really catch on over here, but they were translating and putting out Italian comics. So, I enjoy them. Here's the great Ed Brubaker. Second to the last issue of this series is Fatale, and then this has got a crazy cover on it, so I'll show you this one.
Wow.
Ballistic.
I like that.
That is Derek Robertson, who I like. Did The Boys, as well as Transmetropolitan, right?
That's right. That's right. A book I've actually read.
Spider Jerusalem. You could get that spider tattoo on the side of your bald head there in homage of Spider Jerusalem. Or you could just put a spider on there and smash it. That'd be the same kind of thing.
If there was a spider on my head, trust me, somebody would smash it. I think we had discussed talking about cartoons.
That's right.
I was going to do copious show notes, but I decided against it because I wanted to go on my gut reaction, go with my heart.
Freewheeling Rick.
Yeah, because if I started putting it down on paper, it'd be overly analytical, and there's just so much content to go through. You know, we could be.
I'm a big fan of the overly analytical, but I totally forgot the topic, so I did not create any overly analytical notes. So
well, then this is going to be great. I'm going to just keep it to comic book based cartoons.
Sure.
So, and in no particular order because I don't want to offend anybody out there. But, oh, let me tell you the story that precipitated this whole thing. I went to see Thor and Thor 2 last Friday. There is a movie theater near here. I won't name it because the legality of what they're doing is very suspect. But they're showing movies. Older ones, newer ones, nothing that's current, nothing that's out in the theaters now, but stuff that's,
like
me.
You walked by a door and saw a dude with a Blu-ray player. Is that what you're...
But it was a legitimate. It was an older theater that had been split into 4 little theaters at some point. 2 of them were showing movies, so we went to see Thor, and we had a Groupon for discount tickets, so we figured why not. The concession stand was like all organic and just not the usual crap that you get in a movie theater, so that was good. So we went, we saw Thor. I've seen it. I've seen the movie 3 or 4 times. Becca's seen it once. But, it was a fun night out. And we had a few minutes between the second showing, so we went out to the concession stand, hung around outside, and I hear a cartoon playing, and it's the animated Thor from 1966. And it was amazing seeing it on the big screen like that. And the audience just loved it. And at the end of it, I had actually posted a video on Facebook. And what you don't hear is after the credits roll, there was just rousing ovation and applause for this crappy cartoon.
Okay, here, hang on a second, and let's listen to this. I've got it queued up here on YouTube. Can you hear that?
Yep.
Woo!
I get a chill every time I hear it. Now, the audience, this theater is located in the middle of what we affectionately call the student ghetto, because there's about 2 or 3 major colleges that are fairly close in proximity, and all the housing is in that general vicinity. So this theater was filled, and I mean absolutely filled with college girls, just packed. There's maybe 2 guys in there, me being one of them, and everybody was in their 20s. So I don't know.
Were you with one of your sons, or were you with a friend, or were you with Becca?
I was with Becca.
So okay, say no more. So your appreciation of the college girls was reined in a little bit.
So it was weird because they're all in their 20s, and I had to think to myself they had probably never seen that before. That's that would be my guess. And then I started thinking about it more. Those cartoons, I remember them first run, and it had to be my first experience with Marvel Comics, were those cartoons. And I have very fond memories of it because my mother, especially, she loved the Hulk cartoons. And the weird thing about them, I mean, everybody denigrates the animation. It's like, okay, I get it. The animation is crude, cheaply done, but at its core, you're looking at, some fairly decent Jack Kirby art, and the stories were pulled right from the comics. So you had
Yeah.
you had some great Stan Lee writing, and a good chunk of those shorts were serialized. Especially, I think the Captain America, the Sleeper Saga. So it was good. It was good stuff. Especially when you're a young kid, you don't really appreciate animation technique. You don't care. You've got
Well, I
characters.
mean, it looked like the comics. I mean, there was no really. I mean, I guess there was better animation out there. I mean, I guess Looney Tunes and Flesher and the like. But I mean, as a kid, it wasn't like today where you have 2 or 3 networks that do nothing but run cartoons 24 hours a day and videotapes and DVDs. I mean, when there was some cartoon on, you watched it whatever the heck it was and
Yeah.
liked it, especially if it was a superhero cartoon, which there were very few of.
Right.
Out-
Until '66, then all of a sudden the floodgates open, because not only did you have Marvel, but now on the other side you had the Superman Aquaman hour, and the nice thing about that was you got some really good Superman cartoons. I mean, they were good. There was no doubt about it. They were good. The Aquaman, that was good stuff. I didn't mind it. And if you were lucky, because they always showed, three reels, the middle one was always an off character. It was either, Green Lantern or Flash, or if you were really lucky, Justice League or the Teen Titans. And that's where I got my exposure to DC, outside of Batman and Superman. So the cartoons were very, very important. And I think the producers realized that, because then everybody else started jumping on board. And then you had Hanna-Barbera snatching up the rights to do the Fantastic Four. I remember the first day that I saw that, it was the episode with Diablo, and I'll never forget it. It just blew my mind. Saturday morning. And that just cemented my love for Saturday mornings, was watching the Fantastic Four. And then Hanna-Barbera started making up their own heroes, and you had, the Herculoids and Space Ghost, and, it went on and on until about the late '60s, and then they started,
Who was the guy with the club that wore the? Is that Thundar or Mitor or?
The Mighty Mitor.
You remember he had like that kind of weird skull and a little bit of
buffalo hat, yeah.
Yeah, and just like a big club, and he'd fly around like Thor. He'd like, I don't know, just hold the club out in front of him and fly around.
Yeah, but I mean, this is, when you think about it, Saturday mornings, and it was like an unwritten law, especially amongst parents. That was our time. There were no chores to be done. There was nothing to do. I'm in my pajamas. I'm eating a bowl of soggy Cap'n Crunch, just watching cartoons till about noon or whenever they stopped. And that was the ritual. And like you said, maybe later on you would see cartoons in the afternoon, after school, but Saturday morning was just a chunk of time just carved out for, the youngsters out there back in the 60s and 70s. And everybody jockeyed for everybody else's attention. My favorite part about Saturday morning were the preview shows that you would see right before school started. I don't know if you remember those at all.
I don't have a recollection of those.
Yeah, it was
Are you talking when you say right before school started? You're talking like in August or something,
right,
when they would try to juice you up on like what shows you're going to watch in the fall schedule. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was usually a prime time thing, and because I remember Batman and Robin did one. They hosted one of those shows, and you could probably find it on YouTube if you haven't seen it. But cool. because you wanted to know what you were going to watch.
Right.
You know, you knew Scooby-Doo was going to be on, but you wanted to know what was on after it. You know, what the new shows were, what shows weren't coming back. Some of my favorites. Wow. Yeah, the Marvel stuff. Spider-Man from the 60s.
I kind of lump all those together. I mean, like, to me, still my favorite, and it's just nostalgia. You know, not from a straight quality, but I mean, it was the Spider-Man cartoon show combined with all those Marvel shorts. You know, whether it was Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, any of those. I mean, and it's just more so than the actual episodes, those theme songs, I love those theme songs, all of them. You know, what was your favorite? I mean, Spider-Man, you know, it was a longer theme song. It was like a whole sequence. Spider-Man took the cake. I love the Spider-Man theme song. But among the other ones, what was your favorite one?
Oh, my God. What kind of question is that? It's a Sophie's choice. I would have to say, oh, man. I really like the Hulk theme, but I like the Iron Man opening too, but I like the Iron Man opening with the animation. There was just something about that, you know, with him in the race car and the quick switch over to Iron Man.
Here's my favorite.
Got it queued up? Let's go to the clip.
I love that. If he's led to a fight and a duel is due, the red and the white and the blue will come through. You know, they had a way with words on those. And then, you know, same with you know, Doc Bruce Banner belted by gamma rays, and you know, Tony Stark made you feel he's a cool exec with a heart of steel.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is, those little songs, if you've never seen these cartoons or read the characters, it gives you just a little quick, little bio. So now you know Tony Stark is Iron Man, even though you've never seen it before.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you remember those songs, watching those things. I mean, it's like 20 years ago went by, and I didn't watch one of those cartoons or see it, and you still knew the words. You still, you know, that comes up, and that's, you know, it's like, I think they had people who write jingles for commercials or something must have come up with those things, because they were really, really catchy.
They were, yeah. And if you listen to the music and listen to the words, there is a timeless quality to it, because you can't listen to it and say, geez, that sounds very, you know, 1966. It sounds very modern. No, it just has this really anthemic, rousing quality to it that I think is timeless.
Yeah, I mean, that's, to me, what puts the Marvel ones a notch above the DC ones in my memory. Because the openings for the DC ones, while similarly were telling you you know, who these guys were and stuff, it was more like that announcer, you know, Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, you know, and all this kind of, it's just like, and then it would have the rousing orchestral music, and it was a very different style.
Right.
And if you step back and look at the style that was used for the DC openings and the style that was used for the Marvel ones, they were reflective, I think, of the difference between Marvel and DC at the time, too, where Marvel was more punchy and, you know, just kind of catch you and grab you, and, you know, just Stan Lee jumping around with Excelsior and all that. And the DC was a little more, you know, the staid, traditional sort of way.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, and think about it, and when you really put it into context, Marvel is really starting to gain traction by 66, 67. I mean, they really caught hold, and even in the pop culture sense, because then they started merchandising, hot and heavy. That's when you're really starting to see the toys come out, and the magazine articles and stands all over the place, and there's lectures on college campuses. So it was interesting to see, because you can't imagine DC doing anything like that.
Right.
When, to play catch up. Because I'm sure there was Batman merchandise back then, but it really didn't. It wasn't until the TV show, again in '66, where DC came into the forefront. And that was Batmania. Wow, that was something else.
For me, it was those Marvel stuff, including Spider-Man, even though it was sort of a little separate. And then the DC stuff, where, again, it was the Superman Aquaman hour that was kicked up the notch, like you said, by those inclusions of those. But there weren't that many of those other ones, so I'm kind of thinking that, a lot of times you wouldn't get one of those, Flash, Green Lantern, Justice League, Teen Titans, Atom. I think they only made maybe 2 of each of those.
Right.
And the Superman Aquaman hour ran a long time, but you would get like the Superboy cartoon in the middle, the Adventures of Superman when he was a boy.
Yes.
The Mighty Lad of Steel, and you get, so you'd get that in, and I guess Batman had his own show, huh? Batman was popular enough that he had his whole own deal going on.
Yeah, that was another one I was going to bring up, because the Batman Adventure Hour, or whatever it was called, probably the first animated iteration done by Filmation Studios, to me, was probably the most accurate translation of a comic to a cartoon that had been done to that point. I mean, Superman was okay, but I still felt it was lacking in some areas. The Batman cartoon was, head and shoulders above anything else that had been done. I'm talking just DC.
Batman has a phenomenally superior rogues gallery to Superman.
Mm-hmm.
In the day. I mean, even now, in my opinion, Batman has one of the top, and that we should do an episode sometime about favorite rogues galleries. But Batman, you just can't compare Penguin, Joker, Riddler, Catwoman, Mad Hatter, Mr. Freeze, all that to, the Prankster and, Toyman and Mxyzptlk and, Superman had these guys, but most of those guys served on the Superman cartoons to, pretty much just dick with Superman. None of them were any kind of realistic threat to Superman. It wasn't they finally figured out in later days, you got to throw Mongul and Darkseid and Doomsday and people like this up against Superman. You can't have the impish pixie from the 5th dimension turning him into a marshmallow fingers or something. It's just that doesn't do the trick.
No, you're absolutely right. You have the most powerful being in the universe. You're just flustered by a guy that has giant toy robots chasing him and just causing wanton destruction.
Yeah.
But the thing that I liked about the Batman cartoon, like I said, it was a great translation. The Joker looked exactly like he did in the comic.
Yeah.
It wasn't, because I was really
the Jerry Robinson Joker, classic.
I was very aware by that point, and I remember finding a Batman comic and just being shocked at how much it was not like the TV show. And I think at that point, I kind of drifted from the show and drifted more into comics. And then with this cartoon, that helped cement it, down the road. the Fantastic Four, anything on a licensed property, I watched all my life. Even the horrible, horrible Fantastic Four that came out in the '70s.
Herbie. Is that
Yeah,
the Herbie one?
yeah.
Some people are nostalgic about that, so, which is fine.
I mean, you had Kirby layouts, but the writing was kind of not really there. I know the Hanna-Barbera stuff was, loosely based on specific issues, so they were kind of close. So you really couldn't mess up if you stuck with the stories. The '80s Spider-Man, because there were two, there was Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man, and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Wasn't really a fan of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. I could care less about them. I didn't give a damn about Firestar or Iceman or the damn dog, Miss Lion. I just wanted to see a new version of Spider-Man, updated, from the '60s one. So the first show was, pretty good. And it kind of freaked me out at one point because I remember watching an episode where he was fighting Juggernaut. And he's fighting him in the construction zone, and, there's a skeleton of a building, and there's girders, and, the Juggernaut. And that Saturday, went to Hobo Pharmacy to get my comics, and, wouldn't you know it, Spider-Man's fighting Juggernaut. It was creepy.
But the '90s Spider-Man series blew it away.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, talking quality, I mean, after those Marvel ones, I think my second favorite probably of all time would have to be the Batman the Animated Series and its spin-offs that Bruce Timm was key. I mean, that whole universe that was created, I mean, that was so well done, and really that is something that set the stage for DC animation all the way through to today. I mean,
yeah.
You look at like anything that's done in their movies, even when they got like kind of a different style and stuff, just the tone and the quality, and hell, Andrea Romano is still doing the voice casting on every one of those things, right? It's just from that point forward, that was kind of the gold standard. And, when you can be the gold standard for 25 years, that's something.
Yeah.
So that really holds up.
Wow. I just got chills thinking about it. Yeah, because I remember sitting, I think it was a Friday night, it might have been, watching Fox, watching the very first episode, and just being totally blown away. It was like nothing we had ever seen before. The style was reminiscent of the old Fleischer Supermans, which I really appreciated. And like you said, they established their own universe, their own rules. It was pretty much self-contained, so it was good. It was good. And it seemed to run forever. And I think it was only 7 seasons.
But still, 7 seasons is so much more than any, superhero-related thing had really, cartoon had ever run. I mean, you got Scooby-Doo that ran forever and a day, right? But most other animated property, I mean, Bugs Bunny and things like that, but, it's like these kind of properties, they didn't last that long. You had, like, when you look back on it, the limited amount that there actually was. Now, Super Friends, that ran a long time, but it was goofy stuff. I mean, Super Friends, for its day, at least me, I liked it because you didn't have anything else. So you kind of like, oh, well, we got this. But, like, if I compare it to everything else that's out there, other than a sense of nostalgia and it was good for what it was, I don't see it kind of holding up quality-wise compared to these other things that we're talking about. Even
Not
with its limited animation, I feel like the Marvel stuff was better. I think in tone and animation and voice and quality and the whole thing, the DC stuff that was out in the 60s was better than that. I mean, it was kind of like, it was weak in comparison.
It was, I don't know if it was deliberately, because you got to remember, by the end of the 60s, all these groups were going after the cartoons for their violence, and superhero stuff just vanished overnight. And then Super Friends came along. I remember distinctly, I love the opening. I love the opening music. I love the opening animation. I was very disappointed when I actually watched an episode because there was no strife, there was no conflict. It was, why
couldn't have Arrow. I mean, that was the whole thing. They were purposely watering it down to get it by the board of censors that was around protecting the children in those days. So, I mean, like you said, I don't really hold it against them. They were working within the constraints that they had to work in to get this thing on the air and make money, make a buck off it, right? But compared to what we got before that and what we got after that, it was definitely kind of a low point.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would call it. I can remember specific stories, any animation series that I've watched, except for Super Friends, in the first couple of seasons. I cannot remember any. I remember the Hall of Justice. I remember
the Hall of Justice, and then that weird headquarters for the Legion of Doom, right?
Yeah, I think that was a little bit later, though, because
a little bit later.
Villains.
But it was that same kind of. It was still Super Frenzy, right?
But that series did. I don't remember the names of all the iterations because I think by that point I kind of drifted more into comics and out of animation. But I seem to remember Challenge of the Super Friends kind of brought them up into the 80s and up to speed, and it was almost watchable.
Which one had? Because there was some that had Wendy and Marvin, and some that had Zan and Jaina.
I think. Yeah, Wendy and Marvin, I think.
And the Challenge of the Super Friends?
Challenge of the Super Friends, they got rid of all of them. And
all of the kids, okay.
Yeah,
I didn't mind the Wonder Twins. They were kind of fun in a goofy sort of way. And a lot of people have like a really strong nostalgic connection to those Wonder Twins.
I have no connection to them or the monkey.
I think people who were younger when those came out, right? Because we were in our late teens by that point, right?
Yes.
So it was like you looked at that and said, "Oh, this is kind of weak. Well, I should be out scamming some chicks or something. I shouldn't be. I shouldn't be watching this bullshit." I could actually, justify watching Batman the Animated Series or something, or a Fleischer Superman cartoon because that was good. But when you're like looking at Challenge of the, these Super Friend kind of things, it's like, okay. If I was 8, I'd be eating this up.
Wondering why Black Vulcan is wearing a leotard.
Yeah. Wondering why they even used Black Vulcan in the first place instead of Black Lightning or some actual character,
You know what? I keep forgetting. I Isabella, creator of Black Lightning, on Facebook. I should just ask him. I'm sure. Well, no, it doesn't make sense.
Maybe it's like just they didn't have to like pay some royalty or something if they came up with some lame knockoff of somebody or.
Yeah, it was weird. It was weird.
Back from the day when you couldn't have a black character that didn't have black in his name somewhere, just to remind you.
Yeah, the thing about the Batman animated series, and when, like you said, all of its spin-offs, like the New Adventures of Batman and Robin, and even Superman, the animated series, which I really, really liked. those weren't for kids. Those, I believe, they catered to an older audience. I mean,
but kids could watch them. I mean, the thing with all of those was they struck that ground where there was content in there that worked really well for an adult watching the show. But see, that was when Batman the Animated Series was on and Superman the Animated. My kids were little when because those came out in the 90s. So my kids were in the prime watching age for that stuff. And they actually watched that stuff, and I watched it with them. The same thing with that Spider-Man animated series that came out in the 90s. You know, all of those, they worked on, as most successful cartoons or any kind of entertainment will, you know, that's on television anyway, it worked for the kids. And then as an adult, you didn't feel like it was talking down to you, or, you know, it didn't feel like it was insulting your intelligence.
Right.
Watch this thing, which that was the kind of metric that the Super Friends stuff failed, right? I mean, the Super Friends worked really good for kids, I think, but an adult looking at it without the nostalgia aspect, you look at it and it's just like, this is pretty weak, you know?
Yeah, I would say the second renaissance for animated cartoons, superhero stuff, was probably the 90s. There was a lot of stuff on the air, and it's all starting to come back to me now because
there was a good X-Men cartoon in the 90s too, and it was funny because those cartoons in the 90s were so good, and those were the same years when the comics at Marvel and DC were just getting so derivative and just incestuous of themselves with the, you know, giant pouches and leather jackets and, you know, just all kinds of crazy stuff that I was turning away from a lot of those comics, but I could watch the cartoons and say, this is some really good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you'd get your fix that way, and you kind of didn't need to, you know, read the monthly comic.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the X-Men cartoon is I think a lot of its fan base were women. And I mean, I think it was a gateway in the 90s for girls to start getting into cartoons and to comics. I mean, it's amazing how many women that I've met that just so fondly remember that series. For me, it was all right. You know, there was a lot of other stuff on too, but yeah, there was the fan base for that show was just rabid at some point. So, you know, it did its job.
Wait a minute, you're telling me that there was an X-Men thing that had a rabid fan base?
You know what? We need to put newsflash on the bottom.
Newsflash. X-Men property had rabid fan base.
Let's go to the Situation Room.
How many copies of the 5 covered X-Men #1 by Jim Lee did they sell to comic book shops in the 90s?
How many do you need? I've got
5 million, 10 million, something like that.
Also in the 90s, we had a Hulk cartoon and Iron Man and Fantastic Marvel Action Hour, which was Iron Man and Fantastic Four. I remember watching it. Some of the Fantastic Four stuff was really good because I think they also pulled from original stories like And the Blind Man Shall Lead Them, etc. I haven't seen it in a while. I'd like to go revisit it at some point. But FF is one of those weird properties that pops up every decade, but you always forget about it. You know? They had an incarnation in the 60s, 70s. I don't think they had anything in the 80s. They had something in the 90s, and a couple of others, you know, since then. So they keep trying to get it right, but nobody's been able to do it yet in either the movies or the cartoons. except for The Incredibles. The Incredibles to me was the best Fantastic Four movie that was made. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, The Incredibles was a good movie. I mean, it was something kind of. I think the fact that it poked fun at parts of the genre was what gave it some of its charm.
Mm-hmm.
And then plus, taking something and making a 2-hour movie, not to trivialize, making a 2-hour or hour and a half movie, but that it's different than trying to spin up a couple of seasons of a show. You kind of concentrate everything into this package and just really, tone it down to the core elements. And those guys who make those Pixar movies pretty much know what they're doing, right?
Oh yeah. Just in general, there have been so many, and these are my two favorite characters. Obviously, I have a room full of Spider-Man and a whole floor of Batman stuff here. But there have been so many Batman series post the animated series that it's hard to keep track because they just churn out these series. Nothing can seem to run more than 2 seasons anymore. It's 2 seasons, you're out. Then the next iteration. Now, I heard there's another Batman series coming out after they just canceled the one that was just on.
I read somewhere, and I don't remember the particulars, but there was like a business reason for that. That they run for a certain amount of time, they milk the merchandise on it, they get enough episodes for a certain kind of syndication on it, and then they just pull the plug on it and go on to something different, because at a certain point you stop being able to sell the toys unless you go, remember, take a little action figure twist here.
Mm-hmm.
But remember at that point when you would get these ludicrous Batman, like Pirate Batman, Lightning Strike Batman, Batman in scuba gear, Batman, you probably are pulling some off the wall here. But and even the pirate one was different because that was kind of like an Elseworlds Batman, so it's kind of cool. But, when they just had all these crazy made-up costumes of Batman in order to try to sell more Batmans.
Who would buy this? I love Batman. You can look behind me. I love Batman. I love the Caped Crusader. Who would buy this? I don't even know what this is. Tiger Stripe Batman?
I don't know, but they had a million of them. My son, he liked them. I mean, I remember he had Batman pajamas, and he liked his Lightning Strike Batman action figure, so my wife cut out lightning bolts out of white paper and kind of stuck them to the pajamas, and he became Lightning Strike. And he is 3, So it's but that's the thing is, though, that when you come up with, you notice that now when they come up with the new Batman series, they purposely kind of have a very different look to it. So it's not just all the Batman animated series kind of look. They come up with a fresh look on it so that now they can make a whole line of toys in the style of the new thing.
Right.
And it's not just making another costume, but it's, here's a whole new thing. And now because, frankly, I mean, they make way more money off of all that ancillary junk than anything else. I mean, that's the golden egg, right?
I know, I'm sitting in it.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating as a viewer because DC really knows what they're doing with animation. That's the one thing they do right. They may not be able to get any decent movies off the ground, and I'm not talking about Superman or Batman, but anything else, but they really know animation. And they have an ability to grab the viewer, an adult viewer, suck them in, and then the legs get chopped out after 2 seasons. This happened with Justice League Unlimited. It happened with Legion. It happened with Teen Titans. I mean, it's just enough already. Come on, just I'm going to buy the toys anyway. I have disposable income. Just let the series run its course. There's nothing worse than you're 2 seasons in. You finally got your footing. You've got your rhythm down. You're really starting to churn out good stuff, and then boom, you're just gone. So that's my adult frustration with animation today.
What did you feel about Teen Titans Go?
I loved it. I thought it was so clever.
Because that was like a very different take on those. I mean, it's like almost like they took the boiled down elements of what made the Teen Titans fun, and they just threw away everything else and kind of made this weird mashup with anime.
Yeah.
Or something. And even like anime and 60s Scooby-Doo cartoons where a lot of episodes you'd have people like running through doors back and forth, chasing people, and just very classic staples of animation, but it was just crazy fun. It was not
crazy fun, but it was
it didn't feel like a straight superhero show.
Right.
Like, Batman animated series or Brave and the Bold or, any of those, Batman Beyond, right? Those all felt like fairly straight action shows. Teen Titans Go was not that.
Right. But they really did their homework when they were dealing with the source material because, you would have characters like Trigon and Slade, and it's like your mind was blown. The kids don't know because the kids weren't reading Teen Titans back in the day. They just think it's a cool new character. But the writers nowadays really know how to cater to both sides. And I found that more so with Marvel's Superhero Squad, which is a ridiculous show. It's just ludicrous. But there are so many Easter eggs and so many winks and nods that it's so much fun to watch.
I have never watched an episode of that.
That is a guilty pleasure. You should do yourself a favor and watch one because you're going to wind up giggling like a little girl like I did.
Is it one of the ones that's on like one of these... Marvel's been doing a lot of stuff on like Disney XD or some other pay channel that I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of don't watch any of that stuff just for that reason alone.
Yeah, if you get a chance, Superhero Squad, it's just...
I mean, I have some of the little figures. The little figures
yeah,
are...
I got
a couple Tupperware bins full of little Superhero Squad figures.
Yeah, I got them hanging up all over the place here, but...
They modeled all their feet after Humberto Ramos drawings. It's definitely the Bigfoot style.
Nice. So there was another show that people don't seem to remember. The Silver Surfer. You remember seeing that?
No.
In the 90s. It ran for 1 season. The artwork was incredible. Incredible. Look it up when you get a chance, because it just felt like what animated Kirby should look like. And I'm not a huge Kirby fan, but some stuff I like him doing, some stuff I don't. Him doing a surfer cartoon, which is what this basically was really good. And I'm surprised it didn't run longer than it did. But nobody really knew who the Silver Surfer was back in the 90s, so... I forgot about how much I enjoyed that show.
Now they just know that he's the character from the Fantastic Four movie they liked the least.
Well,
that movie got a bad rap, I think.
My favorite parts of that movie were when he was in it. So
yeah.
Well, we'll find out when they do a reboot. See if they can get it right this time. I'm trying to think of what else. There's been a zillion Iron Man
Well, I mentioned really briefly, I mean, in the Batman franchise, you did have the Batman Beyond, right?
Yep.
Which was very different. And I liked how that that was new to animation, right? I mean, they've since done Batman Beyond in the comics, but
Right.
that whole future Bruce Wayne, Terry McGinnis thing, that whole thing was very creative, I thought, and it goes to show that you can do a successful run of a series, spinning it off from concepts, and it doesn't have to be a direct adaptation of something that already existed in the comics.
Right.
They created that IP fresh for that cartoon series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a different concept. I liked it. You know what else I liked was I don't know what they called it. Was it Spider-Man 2099 or was it Spider-Man Unlimited?
I don't know which they did as a cartoon show. They probably Spider-Man Unlimited. 2099 was the Peter David series. I don't know that if they've ever done a cartoon of that. I didn't see it, but they did do a second Spider-Man run that he went back to. Wasn't he like a high school student in that one again?
Oh no, the one I'm thinking of took place in the future.
Okay, and they did an actual cartoon of that. I don't remember that. But
now,
once it was like up around the late 90s, I haven't watched a lot of cartoons since then.
Well, Spider-Man has been, just like Batman. They come out with a series and it goes for 2 seasons and it disappears. The one I'm watching now, or watched recently, was Spectacular Spider-Man, which is phenomenal. It is probably my favorite Spider-Man cartoon of all time. It's got all the humor of classic Spider-Man. It's got the action. It's pitch perfect. I can't find anything wrong with this series. I mean, it doesn't have the nostalgia that the 67 series will always have, but it's one of those shows where even my boys like it, and they're just, jaded, grumpy teenagers. That's one show that we love watching together. Because maybe it's because I'm getting older now, but I'm a little tired of grim and gritty heroes, which is one of the reasons why I like Brave and the Bold so much. That show is genius on so many levels because I can't think of another cartoon that would have a short at the beginning that was just basically all those crappy, Silver Age stories that we hated, Batman fighting robots and, dinosaurs and stuff, and just animating it with a straight face, and just it's turning out hilarious. So Brave and the Bold is like right at the top of the list. Batman is the straight man, and whoever he's fighting with that week, the Blue Beetle or
you got to see so many characters you never thought you'd see
animated. Yeah,
cartoon, right?
Wannabes, come on. Yeah. Is that show still going, or did they kill that one too?
They don't keep anything going anymore, as you pointed out.
So 20 years from now, when we're doing this show, these kids today with their.
Well, it's like look at you just said your jaded teenage sons. It's like when did teenagers start becoming jaded? You should be jaded when you're 17 years old. It's like.
What's funny? I come out of the movies more excited than they do nowadays. We'll go see some big summer blockbuster, action film, and I'll come out all excited and woo. And what'd you guys think? It was all right. The story was kind of lame. It's like, oh, come on, guys.
Well, I mean that's the same attitude that is the downfall of a lot of comic books too. It's just a lot of a lot of consumers, readers, whatever, it's like if something is not the greatest thing they've ever read, every single issue after issue, it's just like, that's just lame, and then they drop it. And, this is why they reboot and change artistic teams and creative teams and restart at number ones. I mean, you're just chasing after this short attention span audience that, if you're not firing on all cylinders at all times, there's so many other things out there vying for people's attention, whether it's outside of comics. I find myself the same way. I mean, I just was trimming my list last week, and I dropped about, I don't know, 10 or 15 series because they were okay. They weren't great. It was just, I did a blog about it. It was like, I titled it, "How Much is Too Much? Overmining a Franchise." And I was talking about the Avengers comics in particular, where, just off on the comics for a second, I mean, you look at, and it's just one franchise, but I mean, you have the Avengers, the New Avengers, the Mighty Avengers, the Secret Avengers, Avengers World, Avengers Undercover, and the Uncanny Avengers. That is 7 Avengers titles that are all coming out, right? And some of them, I mean, and it's not an intrinsic quality thing, because I will like these 2 or 3 and somebody else will like these other 2 or 3 best. But the bottom line is, any consumer is not going to feel the same about all of them. And then they start double shipping, where it's like 1 month they put out 2 issues, and then in the October solicits they raised the price to $4.99 on a bunch of them, and it's extra pages, but it's like, 40 pages, $4.99 instead of the regular. And it's like, I looked at it and I found that the 5 series that I was getting of the 7, it came out to like, for the July order, it was like $32 at retail. And I'm like, wait a minute, what is this? And I ended up just like, I looked at them and I said, seriously? It's the Avengers, and it's like $32 at retail and I'm not even getting all the Avengers comic books. And you can apply that same, it's worse when you look at X-Men. There's probably 20 X-Men books that come out in a given month, if you count Wolverine in the X-Men franchise, which I do. And, same thing, you go Batman, you go Green Lantern. I mean, it's like they grow these things, and at some point you reach a snapping point with a consumer. You get that, what's the straw that broke the camel's back? And then, it's like, okay, well, so I'm keeping 2 of them. I'm keeping Avengers and New Avengers, written by Jonathan Hickman. I like those 2 the best,
Doesn't anybody learn from history? I mean, we've been through this. We went through it with Spider-Man. Remember, he had 4 or 5 books out in the 70s. We went through it with Batman, and eventually, there was just so much. Like you said, it snapped, and you culled back, and then you don't have the Batman. You have Detective and you have Batman. That's all you need. You have Spider-Man.
I think they ride it until they break the backs of the fans, because realistically, as long as they're selling decently and they can make an extra, $50,000 a month by selling, another 20,000 copies of these couple of different series, that's an extra $50,000 a month, right? It's like, what the hell? They're going to make it, and then at some point, that $50,000 will go away, and then they'll figure out a way to make that $50,000 somewhere else. They're kind of like playing a shell game, I think, where they're just trying to, let's play this one as long as we can, and then when someone says turn that one over, and it's like, well, it's not, the P's not under that one, Now look at all these variant covers over here,
Oh, no. That's the shell game. Okay, one is multiple titles, one is variant covers, and the other one is kill the character.
That's right. There you go. It's just one or the other of them is always going to rake in additional revenue for the companies, and until they stop, God forbid that, it all came down to story quality, because no matter how good your story quality is, no creative team is going to churn out every single issue month after month as a 5 out of 5 gem that is the greatest thing that people have ever read. And that means that every month, month after month, every title, with few exceptions, tends to sell less than the previous issue, until you do something like kill somebody or reboot it to a new #1, or do whatever, and then new people try it out, and then they'll stick around for a while, but it drops every issue.
Cool.
It's kind of fascinating to watch the economics of it go by, but it just, at a certain point, you just kind of look back, and I think a lot of people who read these things, I see all the time people say, I'm not made of money, I can't read all the comics that I want to read, so I'm going to just concentrate on this little corner of comics. I mean, the advantage that cartoons have is they're on TV, well, except for the ones that are on these pay channels, but, a lot of the people have the subscription to the cable package that comes with those, so it's essentially no cost, because they're going to have that cable package for their other cable. Most people are not buying that cable package just to watch these cartoon shows, right?
Although I would probably.
Yeah.
Maybe.
They're always going to be the people that, you're going to pick out what you're doing there. But, so you pay $10 a month or whatever it costs to watch those cartoons. Well, really, that's the cost of like 2.5 comic books.
Wow.
At the comic shop, right? So if you get, and given that it takes 20 minutes to read a comic book, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're getting less than an hour probably of comic book entertainment for $10. And if for that same $10 you get a couple hours a week of cartoons that you like watching, what's the good deal,
Now, if you could take a time machine and go back to see little Bobby Grethal and say, you know what? In the future, comic books are going to be $4.99. What do you think he would say?
You could take a time machine back 2 months and tell me that, and I'd be like, Marvel. I mean, in the September, I guess September solicits in the July previews catalog. I mean, they really hit these $4.99 books hot and heavy, and
Wow.
it just I don't dislike any of the stuff. They're telling some really good stories. I looked at it and said, $4.99, seriously? And I just reevaluated my whole Marvel pull list, and I was getting like 30 Marvel books, and I cut a bunch of them, and now I'm getting like 17.
How many books were you buying when you were about 10 or 11?
Well, 10 or 11, there weren't that many comic books when I was 10 or 11, so it's kind of, I was getting a bunch of Marvel comics. I mean, I started when I was 8. By the time I was 11, I was probably getting, I had not started reading DC yet by the time I was 11, but I was getting pretty much everything Marvel put out at that point.
I think
But that was still,
4 books a week.
what, like 20 comics or something?
Hmm.
And they were 15 cents. So you had to figure out a way to scrape together $3 a month to buy all your comics.
It wasn't that hard.
I could get $3 a month.
Yeah.
That wasn't a problem. Now, boy, DC puts out 50 or 60 books, and Marvel puts out 60, or actually DC, I don't remember who put out, but between the two of them, they probably easily put out 120 books, if not more, at an average price of $4 a book. So right there, you're talking, That's like $500 to get.
What kid has got that kind of money?
The Marvel and DC books. So, it's just the days of being able to, and then the other thing is even if you have the money, which I could buy every single Marvel and DC comic book if I wanted to. I'm not limited on the funds that way, but reading all those books, that's more of a problem. If I read nothing but Marvel and DC, I could do it. But there's so many other comics. What I find is that when I read the superhero comics, there's so many similar themes to them that I have a hard time differentiating. And that's the saying, it's like if I'm getting 7 Avengers books, or in my case, I'm getting 5 Avengers books, they sort of blur together. And, the Avengers books will blur in with some of the X-Men books, that'll blur in with some other things. And it's like, okay, I'm having a hard time keeping these all straight in my head.
Right.
When you have something that's really unique, like when I pull the indie books into the mix, hell, if I read Ballistic, and I read Fatale, and I read Lunita, these are so wildly different from one another. I don't have any problem at all keeping the stories straight in my mind because they're completely different from the ground on up. The superhero books do that also with certain ones. Like the way that they're writing and doing the new Moon Knight series is so completely different from the way they're doing the new Silver Surfer series, which is so different from Daredevil, which is different from She-Hulk, which is different from the new Ms. Marvel, that I can keep all of those straight because each one of them has a very different art style, and that's a good thing at Marvel too, is they're kind of mixing it up, and it's not all kind of short derivations away from superhero standard art. They've got a lot more uniqueness to some of the different kinds of books that are coming out, and that helps because I can pick those up and I keep them all straight. And that's what I use to kind of cull my list back is, it's like when I pick up She-Hulk, I remember what happened in the last issue of She-Hulk, and it's very different from Silver Surfer, which is very different from, whatever. But when you're in a franchise, there tends to get a blur factor, and it's like, well, that's just me.
I think we should talk more in depth about this next week, how we read comics, because we both, really like 40 years, 80 years of comic reading between us, right?
Yeah.
And I know I don't read the same way I did when I was younger, and I just want to kind of explore that a little bit. And I still read daily. I still manage to squeeze out minutes here and there where, there's a comic nearby. And that's, been a lifelong dream of mine that I would always have access. Initially it was for the boys, but, they pick them up every now and then. So, and I don't want to force it on them,
Well, that's the interesting part because, people say, because I get like 140 comic books a month. And people are like, how do you read 140 comic books a month? It's like, well, it's really not hard to read 140 comic books a month.
Really?
It's kind of hard to read 200 comic books a month, but 140 a month is 35 a week. It's not. Yeah, it's 35 a week, which is 5 a day, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I don't read 5 every day, but I can make up for it, but each day I do probably read at least 2 or 3, and then on the weekend, I read like about 60 books on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
I read a big stack of books on Sunday.
I would remember when I was working in the comic shop. I mean, that's when you were helping customers. That's what you were doing. You were reading because you had to know what you were talking about. And I couldn't even tell you how many books I was reading a day then. Because not only the current stuff, but just digging into the back issues and graphic novels and all that fun stuff. But that's for another day. Because now we got a close-up shop, and I think you forgot to mention something this entire episode. Can you imagine what that would be?
I think I did mention Comic Spectrum because I mentioned my blog on Comic Spectrum. So
just wanted to make sure you got it in there.
go to the blog and you can find the how much is too much blog entry I did this last week and read through that. And the other thing that's on my Facebook page that's a good, if you follow the Facebook page, I do put the links to the online solicits up there. And I've been updating that because we're already in the September cycle now. And I've got links. It's pinned to the top of the Facebook page. And I've been adding stuff to it daily. But starting over a week ago, the DC and Marvel solicits started coming out. And I've been adding every day, like Dynamite solicits came out yesterday. But, we've got IDW, Image, Boom, Dynamite, Aspen. I probably got links to solicits for at least 12 different comic book companies up. And you can just, to me, I'm weird, right? You know that. I find it interesting just to read through the solicits and see what all is out there. I mean, and I don't buy all these comics. I mean, I buy a lot of comics, but I don't buy all the comics. But I kind of keep abreast of what's going on out there just by reading through, here's the solicits. And then I'm working on a blog entry that'll go up in a few days. I do each month called Flying Below the Radar. That I just kind of pick mostly indie books and stuff, but it's I do some Marvel and DC stuff. Like, for instance, this month they're soliciting the first DC. Have you heard of the artist editions?
No.
Okay. When we talk about comics next week, I'll introduce you to the artist. I'm going to blow your mind really quick, though, because I got one here that I'm going through. This is an artist edition.
Oh, nice.
It is the size of original art, and inside this is Jack Kirby's New Gods.
Oh, wow.
So let me look at my head in comparison. This thing is massive, right? And I can bring it in for some detail. It's reproductions of the original art from the comics, and they're done in color, even though it's black and white, because by doing full color scans, you see wherever there's whiteout, wherever there's pencil corrections, blue line, margin notes, you basically see the original art as the artist did it and as the artist turned it in. And, IDW pioneered this format. And there's a whole bunch of them out. But now a lot of other companies are, let's say, paying homage to that format and doing their own versions of these things. So Dark Horse is now doing them. Dynamite's doing them. IDW created them. Scott Dunbar is the guy at IDW created them. But DC's doing their first one of like core DC stuff. They're doing Kelly Jones Batman.
Oh, wow.
And it's in the solicit. So on my Flying Below the Radar, I have a blurb, and it's like Kelly Jones Batman. They call it a gallery edition from DC, but it's the kind of thing where it's, if you want something like that, because the price on one of these is they're like $125 or something because they're massive. I mean, the thing is 12 inches by 18 inches, and it's a hardcover, and it's, probably 150 pages or something. and it's like any one page of original art by any of these guys would cost you thousands of dollars. So, you know, getting this concentrated dose is well worth the money. And, you know, a lot of times if you pre-order, you can get a discount or something. But just because they're so expensive, comic shops tend not to buy 10 copies of this to have sitting around on their rack, right? You can imagine, you know, a comic shop is not going to drop $1,000 on the off chance that 10 people are going to come wandering in to buy the Batman Gallery Edition from them. So they might get one or two for the shop. And, you know, so if you want these things, you need to ask your shop to get it for you. And that's why I do the flying below the radar thing, because I try to look at stuff and it's like, oh, that's cool. And it's also something that if you don't ask your shop for, there's a really good chance that they're either not going to order it at all, or they're only going to order it for pull list people, or they'll maybe get one copy or two copies for the rack. And if you're not there first thing on Wednesday, you'd never even know that that book came out, because a couple of people are going to buy those before you ever walk into the store. So it's just, you know, kind of a feature that I like doing, and it's just like, here's stuff that you might want to be on the lookout for. And it's just all different stuff, but it's typically not heavy on superheroes, because frankly, most comic shops do carry the superhero stuff, and you don't have to worry about missing the superhero stuff in most comic shops, unless it's something like that gallery edition that's, you know, a special thing.
Yeah, that looks really interesting. My mind is a little blown. Now I'm wondering if I could, you know, seek out specific artists or specific titles.
Well, I've got all of them that have come out so far. And the other one that I spotlight on the upcoming one is John Buscema's Silver Surfer.
Wow, that's beautiful.
And it's got full art from issues 5 and 6, the giant-sized issues 5 and 6 of Silver Surfer.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, these are typically limited by where they can lay their hands on the actual original art to scan, because it's not like you can just go and get a comic book and, you know, make copies of it. You need the actual original art to do these. So it's kind of tricky to do them, but there are some fabulous ones. There's a couple of John Romita volumes out. John Romita's Spider-Man. There's a Gil Kane Spider-Man. Fabulous stuff.
Ooh. All right,
Fabulous
that's enough.
The second, one of them, you know, has got the death of Gwen Stacy, one of your favorites.
Stop it! Come on, you're killing me.
Will Eisner's Spirit. It goes on. I will. I should. You know, I need a widescreen webcam to show some of these.
Rubbing it in now. He's sticking his finger in the bullet hole, people.
Right. Go check out Comic Spectrum. There's all this and much, much more can be found there.
ComicSpectrum.com, and I will go there after I sign off, because that's what I usually do. And thanks to everybody for watching. We have one viewer. We'll have more later. And we will see you. Ooh, this is tricky because both the boys are graduating tomorrow, and the graduation party is Sunday. So, probably a week from now, Tuesday or Wednesday. Wednesday at the absolute latest. We'll shoot for Tuesday. We'll see what we can do.
Well, that's like what we did this week, right? And it's good because then it's 4th of July weekend, so I'm sure that weekend's going to be tough, too.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for stopping by. This is the Pop Cult Online Power Hour signing off. Say goodnight, Bob.
Good night, Rick.
Good night.